Hey, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of CMO Latam. We are very, very glad and very happy that we have a new guest here on the show. The guest is called Andrew Strickman. He's currently Chief Marketing Officer at New American Funding. Andrew, thank you for accepting this invitation. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Santi. It's great to be here. Really appreciate the invitation. Looking forward to talking about marketing and talking about topics that matter.
Yeah, I want to start like just to warm things up. I want to know if in your career I was a stalker. I was stalking you on LinkedIn, and I want to know. I have this 17 entries, more than 17 entries on your experience. Like you've been
I'm an old
everywhere. You've been
man.
around.
I'm an old
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say like you've been around, but yeah, we can say that if you say so. Um, Andrew, I want to know. I have this when I stalk my guests, and I see so many experience entries on their LinkedIn account. I tend to have this, I don't know, this massive curiosity about like the biggest lessons from previous jobs, like those tools that you've been gathering on your toolbox that you say like, if I jump to another job, or if I decide to, I don't know, create my own company and start my own company, my own startup or whatever, I'm sure I'm gonna use these mantras, these tools. These are the things I think to be true right now at the present moment, because in marketing everything changes all the time. But what are those things that you hold true, like like taking or distilling from your life, from your previous jobs and experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I've been incredibly fortunate in my career. My career began in the early 90s. Out of college, I was a journalist for many years. And I think it was through journalism and being a reporter that I learned how to tell stories and how to tell stories in the words of the subjects of those stories. And as I moved and shifted into the world of first into digital media and then ultimately into the world of marketing, I really learned how to take stories that brands want to put out into the world and marry those with the stories that consumers or customers were already telling about those brands, and really find that sort of core central connection between how brands want to be perceived and how their customers already perceive them. Because I think that understanding is at the root of creating very strong, differentiated, sturdy brands. In terms of life lessons or career lessons, I've also been very lucky. I've had almost exclusively positive experiences in my professional life. I've worked with amazing people. I've had incredible mentors. I've really learned a lot through both experience and through witnessing great work from other people. And I haven't had too many bad experiences. The recently or more recently, I did have one of those experiences. I found myself in a role and in a position where there just was not the right connection between who I was and what my values were and how I perceived work and the leaders that I was working with. And as a result, we made a mutual decision that we were going to part ways. And what it told me and what it demonstrated for me was how important it was to get those connections right at the start and to really make sure that who you were working with was just as important as what you were doing and how you were doing it.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm so lucky to have landed at a company like New American Funding, which was founded 20 years ago by a husband and wife who are still the co-CEOs. It has grown from 10 people in a room in those early years to more than 4,000 employees across the United States.
Wow.
And there's just an enormous culture of kindness and respect and intelligence that drives all of the work that we do. And it is, at the root of why I chose this job, or why this job chose me, I suppose.
Yeah.
But when I circle it back to the learnings that you asked about, I think probably the greatest learning I've taken away from the entirety of my professional life is at least to try to listen first and speak later, particularly as I've grown as a leader. And I have teams. My team currently is about 55 people. Um,
Wow.
when you're in charge of that many people and the work of that many people, and you have strong opinions and you have strong beliefs, it's very easy to sort of stand up and tell people what to do or tell people how you think something should be done, when in fact, you're going to create a much stronger relationship with your team and ultimately get better work out of everyone if you are a thoughtful leader who listens as much as they speak, and preferably listens before they speak.
Yeah, the other day I was watching, like, I think, do you know Ryan Holiday, the author, the like
Yeah, the name rings a
this guy
bell.
who's bringing back this stoicism thing, but put it on common language,
Mm-hmm.
not that complicated, like meditations from Marco Aurelius, or those books that are hard to read and hard to understand. And he was saying, like, if you want to take away something, and you from stoicism, is just take 2 seconds before responding.
Yeah.
You don't have control on what happens to you, and you don't have control on what people says, or what people are opinions are, but you have control over how and why you react. And if you take the pause, and if you pause for 2 seconds before responding, before reacting, you're going to see a noticeable and exponential increase in the quality of your decisions and the quality of interactions. And I think, in terms of leadership, that's what you're saying. That's my interpretation of what you're saying. Like,
That's
take
absolutely
the
right.
pause, man, and take the pause, man, and understand that they have the people in front of you. They have their own projections, their own troubles, their own, their own, like, their own universe. They're their own
Yeah.
universe. So you need to start listening more. That's why this is a common saying. I don't know in Spanish, but that's why you have two ears and only one mouth. Like, you need to double the listening and half the talking.
I
So
love it.
I think
I
that's it. And for a leader,
I completely align to that. And I really like how you interpreted what I said, because that's absolutely true. I mean, one of the hardest lessons to learn, as you mature in any role, whether it's in marketing or elsewhere, is to try not to be reactionary to a
yeah,
particular person or a particular idea. The number of times that I fired off an email when I was amped up about something because someone
uh,
either pissed me off or created a moment of conflict. And then, of course, after you fire off that emotional email, you generally regret what you said and how you
yeah,
said it. And so, a lesson that I've tried to teach to lots of folks who I've worked with and who have worked for me is write that email, but actually take the person's name off of it and don't send it. Just write it, get your emotions out, get your frustrations out, and then go back an hour, 2 hours the next day and reread what you wrote and edit it and cut it down
yeah.
and pull all of that emotion out of it. And it's been a good life lesson for me personally, and I think it's also benefited folks I've worked with as well.
Yeah, and I think that also creates aligns with the culture, the company culture you were speaking about earlier. And it's like, when you create that environment where you're not reactive and reactionary to every I don't know, every stimulus on the job. And you have a 50, how many people on your team?
55 people on my team.
Imagine if you react, like, instinctively, like with your instincts and your guts, every time someone says something to you. You have a huge team with a lot of problems, challenges, KPIs moving. You have the board, I don't know, breathing down your neck and all that, corporate stuff. And imagine if the life you would have had if you were, like, reacting to everything, like, the with your guts. That
Yeah,
would be,
I mean,
miserable.
in English we call them fire drills, right? And when it's all hands on deck, and a leader, an executive says, "I need this. I needed it yesterday. Get it done." And the adrenaline starts coursing. People get really amped up. First of all, oftentimes mistakes are made that way.
Yeah.
Secondly, it is not a good way to live your life to be in that constant state of fight or flight, right? And I
Mhm.
think that to the degree that we as leaders within an organization can try to turn down the heat in those moments, the better off
Yeah.
everybody is. And I think that my team has certainly learned that they have permission to try to, sort of turn that down, and also it creates just better work overall.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanna jump on now to let's talk. You were talking about before, like storytelling is one of the biggest lessons you had. Like when there is this brand that knows how to tell the story, and we can, I don't know, jump off and name dropping a lot of huge brands we know. But that's not the idea. But when the story is carefully given to the public and given to the audience relates, and then it creates a ripple effect in time, not only on the moment, on the present. Like performance marketing wants to direct responses to go for a call to action, but when you create good brands with good storytelling, it tends to build up like an asset, probably one of the biggest assets a company can have. And we've been having with this, with digital marketing and the wave of digital marketing and social media, we've been obsessed recently, well, not recently, for the last 10 years probably, with performance marketing and paid ads. And I need to create this copy, and I need to people to react on my conversion rate and my click-through rate. And that it's okay. That's the market we live in. But we were on the pre-chat, we were talking about how you decided to make like sort of like a bet on creating great and memorable brands. And I want to start talking about it. If we start talking about how to create a memorable brand in any industry, besides just, giving money to Meta and giving money to Google to ads and ads and ads and performance, how or where can we start talking about how to create these brands, and what can be a first step, or where can we start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have found that every brand who knows who it is and allows itself to be seen out in the world in that way starts with a really, really deep understanding of their audience. So, every opportunity I've ever had to build a strong brand has started with research, consumer research, customer research, getting to know the motivations of the people that you're trying to reach, the audiences you're trying to reach, understanding their decision making process. Why would they choose one brand or one product or service over another? And you need to do that research at scale. You need to talk to a lot of people to really understand not only how your product or service or brand can fit into the lives of these people, but where the actual white space is, where the opportunity is to create something differentiated that people are going to respond to. The next step after that research is done and after that deep understanding of your audience is done, I've really come to believe that if a brand doesn't know who it is or who they are, they're never going to be able to put themselves out into the world in a way that other people are going to understand who they are. And so,
Okay.
in my mind, the next step after that research and after that understanding is an effort to really develop your brand positioning.
Okay.
I look at brand positioning as sort of the foundation of the house that you're building. It is the North Star by which every employee within the company can say, I understand who we are, I understand what our business is, and I understand how my job actually contributes to creating that business and driving that business forward. Once you have that brand positioning in place, and brand positioning is not messaging, right? It's really the
Yeah.
core DNA of who you are, what you offer, and how you're differentiated in oftentimes a very competitive market. But it is sort of that foundational element that then messaging can be developed on top of. Because your brand positioning is for every potential customer or audience member out there in the world who may interact with your brand. Messaging can be much more specific to unique audiences within that larger sort of
Yeah.
cohort that is your customer. And messaging can also be a bit more creative. It can be about telling people who your brand is. It can also be an opportunity to sort of co-create with your audience. You mentioned my long career, but I spent 8 years running an early influencer and word of mouth agency here in the United
Okay.
States called Ammo Marketing. And one of the core beliefs that we had at Ammo was the brands that win are those whose consumers tell the best stories. And I think that the brands who are not only comfortable enough to allow their customers to be telling stories on their behalf, but also are willing to take those risks are the ones that are ultimately going to be successful.
Yeah, and you think, and I think positioning also, the brand positioning can also be applied to. I don't know if it was Peter Drucker or Kotler who said, like, you need to decide what business are you in and what business you're not in, right?
Yes.
Like, you cannot, serve everybody. You need to serve your segment, your niche, your avatar, your, I don't know, buyer persona, however they are calling it these days. And you need to understand what your audience is and what you can do for that audience, and not try to be everything, because then you are in you're how is this, how you can say it, in like bilocate, like you are going to two places at the same time, and the one who chases two rabbits catches none, right? So
No,
you need
that's
to
right.
decide, like, make this, I resign to pursue this, and I decide to, yeah, to do pursue this, like rabbit one or rabbit B, but you need to start pursuing only one to catch one, and position yourself like the one, the guy, the company, the brand who's chasing that kind of rabbit, and that may relate to audiences, messaging, products, added value, value proposal, and so on and so forth, right?
That's right. I mean, when I was at Realtor, I was at Realtor.com for 8 years. Realtor.com is an online real estate search site. Biggest competitor in the U.S. Is Zillow. And when we were at Realtor.com, one of the things we wanted to sort of explore was how flexible was our brand? How far out of the core delivery of real estate search could we get? What kind of products or services could we develop that would feel comfortable and connected to our core audience while being able to sort of grow and develop our business further? And what we found was there were definitely some pathways where the brand was not flexible enough to allow for that connective tissue. And as a result, we chose not to develop products or services in those areas. And I think that brand positioning, to both of our points, is really that core set of attributes that, as Simon Sinek used to say, defines your why, or still
Mhm.
says to this day. What is your why, right? And why does your business exist? How is it differentiated? And can you build a protective moat around that differentiation in order to be successful at scale?
Yeah. Can you? Well, no. Let's jump back to the steps. We are at brand positioning, and what happens when you have that brand positioning? That is, it's also like a current thing. Brand positioning doesn't happen at one point in time. It happens, all the time. But after
Yeah,
brand positioning,
I do believe that brand positioning needs to be sturdy enough to last a company probably 5 to 7 to 10 years. You don't want to be constantly changing your focus and changing your direction, right? If your eyes are pointed in one direction and your business is pointing in another, right, it's not going to be successful. But brand positioning can be sturdy, and can last. Messaging and how that messaging is brought to life creatively is definitely something that can be much more ephemeral or less time important. So, and how that maps sort of to traditional marketing is messaging are your campaigns, right? And depending on your brand, depending on what your product is and how you're offering it, generally those campaigns could be 3 months, 6 months, a year long. They could be 2 years long, right? If you find something that works for you, then you're going to continue to evolve that creatively and expand the way that you tell those stories. Um, And that's where things get sort of exciting, right? That's where positioning has to be very creatively driven, but it's almost more of like a technical or scientific approach to building your
Yeah.
brand. Whereas the next step, which is messaging and creative campaign development, that's where the art really comes in, right? That is where you get to sort of paint your picture, paint your canvas in the way that you want. And when it resonates with your audience, when it resonates with your customers, your consumers, you're going to know immediately, right? There are all these factors
Yeah.
that are going to improve as a result, whether it's your brand awareness, whether it is the cost to acquire a customer, driving that cost down, whether it is the kinds of incoming requests for partnerships and co-creative opportunities that come through the door. All of those things are indicators that what you're doing and what you're saying is actually working.
Yeah. And do you think, I wanted to ask you this question before, but in the research, you're like researching your niche, your segment, the problem you solve, researching the audience, your buyer persona, and the research phase, you think there are, what are the common mistakes people make when researching their market? Because sometimes brand positioning and creative campaign creation and messaging can be built on top of a shaky foundation. And I think research, I know, and for the audience and everybody, research tends to be like the boring topic in marketing. Like, oh yeah, research and marketing research, and that tends to be like the boring thing. But it is the foundation in which you create your offers, your messaging, your products. And what tends to be a common mistake or a couple mistakes you see people making when starting the research phase?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest mistake people can make is thinking that they know how to do research if they're not trained as researchers. Um, the sort of attitude of how hard could it be, right? We'll just we'll throw together a survey in SurveyMonkey and put
Yeah.
it out there and see who answers. That isn't the kind of research we're talking about here. It really is a combination of qualitative research where you're talking at length with the different sort of segments or as you said, avatars or sort of customer mapping that you do, and understanding who your strongest or top 3 to 5 sort of customer segments or personas are. You need to find those people, and you need to find them thoughtfully and with some scientific rigor behind it. And then you have to have real intense down to, down to earth and really deep conversations with them about
Yeah.
how they live their lives, what kind of products and services they use, how does that relate to the brand that you are or want to be. So those qualitative interviews are very, very important. And then being able to translate what you hear in those interviews into actionable insights, also super important. And my experience has been that if you're not a trained researcher, if you don't have sort of that approach and those frameworks in place, the outputs are not going to be as
Yeah.
valuable, nor are you going to learn as much from them. And then you oftentimes will take the insights you derive from those qualitative interviews, and then you start to measure quantitatively at scale whether those insights actually resonate, right? And so then you can go out and do a more quantitative, less high touch, a lower touch approach to validating what you learned in the qualitative interviews.
Yeah. That actually happened to us like 6 years ago, what you're mentioning. And we decided to create like the other part of my life, like CMO Latam is the podcast we are currently in.
Yes.
But I also well, the owner of CMO, it's Naranja Media. We are the largest podcast production company here in Latin America. And we decided to create like company packages or strategies, content strategies for companies to create audiences, engage with new audiences, and then make offers, monetize the audience, so on and so on. And we started talking to the people who were our personas, and we we made the mistake of assuming that the insight of one person, of a couple or a couple persons, were the majority, and we didn't like deploy the quantitative bulk to validate those insights
Right.
and see if they were like deployable on a strategy, on a product, on a something, an offer. And we lost like a couple of years thinking that companies needed XYZ product because a couple of guys said to us that they needed it. And we missed the step on bulking up quantitative data just to validate those insights, and we lost a couple of years and a lot of money. And I think the steps on not doing like I would add to that, to your point, don't be only like a desk behind the desk researcher. And I think
Yes,
we need
that's
some,
correct. You got to get out into the
yeah,
world.
you gotta get out into the street and start talking to people. And then of course you use an agency, a method, a framework to create quantitative data points so you can validate those insights. But yeah, I totally relate to that.
And look, I will. There's a saying in America or in English, don't throw good money after bad, meaning you're going to wind up spending more and losing more if you don't do things right the first time. And research is not inexpensive, but it is also not one of the more expensive components of marketing. And I think
Yeah.
that media and creative development tend to be sort of the highest cost, highest ticket items, right? And as a result, being smart and understanding that you need to spend money to make money means that you have to spend your money correctly as well. And I think that finding a reputable researcher or research firm to conduct that early research is super important to being successful in the next step.
I think if you check the fundamentals right at the beginning, I think the probability of then a campaign, a commercial, a very high ticket item, a media campaign, a PR campaign, um, can have a highest chance of success. Not like 100%, but you can increase the chances if you
Yeah,
jot down the fundamentals first.
absolutely.
Sure. Hmm. And well, I want to, I have curiosity on, you said that storytelling was one of the biggest like tools you learned on your journey, and it totally relates and to the brand positioning, to the messaging, and then to the campaigns. Can we
Mm-hmm.
talk about how to create storytelling for great brands and memorable brands, like those, how those two get together?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and great question. I think that storytelling is a bit of a loaded word when it comes to the world of marketing.
Yeah.
In part because these days everyone calls themselves a storyteller, and everyone uses that word to
Yeah.
describe many, many different components of marketing. Where I really bring it to bear is not necessarily through the traditional marketing channels, a 30-second spot, a 15-second advertisement. Well, I do think that there can be incredibly effective storytelling in traditional advertising, but where I think brand storytelling really takes root and is most successful is when a brand recognizes that it has a role to play in informing, educating, or entertaining its audience in a way that is not necessarily a direct through line into their brand, but they can support stories that aren't being told. They can shine a light on important topics that may not be directly relatable to that brand, but by creating content and distributing that content in a way that people have an opportunity to engage with it, creates an enormous opportunity for a brand to strengthen its relationship with its desired audience. I'll give you an example from my Realtor.com days. We were known within our very crowded industry as being the funny ones. We had always
Okay.
used humor to tell stories about probably one of the biggest financial decisions that many people will ever make in their lives, whether to buy a home or not. But we always found a way to laugh at ourselves and laugh at the process, which can be very stressful and very intense. And so our television commercials, our traditional advertising was very humorous. It was witty. But we recognized that there was also an opportunity to extend what we were doing beyond just sort of the traditional advertising or even social advertising. We worked for a few years with the actress Elizabeth Banks. She was our
Mhm.
celebrity spokesperson, and she appeared in all of our advertising, but we also did a lot of really fun, more digitally driven content that was meant to sort of live within social and hopefully pick up some virality. And then we surrounded that with much longer form storytelling that wasn't necessarily about Realtor.com directly, but it was about the home buying process. We actually launched with a media partner, Tastemade, um, a full length television series called Beyond the Book.
Wow.
And that series lasted for 4 seasons because it was compelling content about helping first time home buyers navigate that home buying journey for the first time. We had an incredible host who was sort of the on camera actor, but he was actually a realtor, and he was actually helping these folks through the home buying process. It was educational. It was entertaining. We shot all over the United States. We often shot in markets that people may not have considered as sort of the hot home buying market. But it was also really enjoyable, and it was very relatable. And that type of brand funded content, I think, is one of the things that really set us apart competitively, in addition to the ways we used humor in our advertising.
Mm. And I think when brands appear natively on the content and not just pushy, like call 10777 realtor, when that's the traditional marketing, and if there's humor involved, and also when the brand is creating content and creating stories that are not looking at their own belly button, at their own offers, their own features and benefits, and click here, click that, and we are the best in, blank. We are the blank. No, and when brands are creating stories that are in the middle of this, the circumference between the two circles, what the brand wants to say and what the people want to hear or
Yeah.
want to listen to, and that the Venn diagram, right?
Yes, the Venn
And the
diagram.
the part where, those where the two circles meet. And I think that's where good storytelling from coming from a brand gets made. and
Yeah,
and
I did want to just add one other thing. I mean, one of the reasons I also arrived at New American Funding was it's a very mission driven business. We are a brand that believes in defining a path to homeownership for everybody, not just wealthy white people. And as a result, we have focused enormous amount of effort on supporting the path to homeownership for previously underserved communities, whether those are communities of color or culturally relevant communities. We have particular programs to support the path to homeownership for Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. And that there's a history in the United States of discrimination in housing and lending, particularly to underrepresented communities, communities that may once have been in the minority, but are quickly becoming the majority in the United States. And that mission and the reason why everyone deserves a home to call their own, that really resonated with me. And it spoke to me, and it also just creates an enormous opportunity to tell meaningful stories, both of great success in helping people find homes, but also in the challenges that they face and how we overcome those challenges together is is a story for the ages.
Absolutely, absolutely right, and that's amazing. And I think when you pick your buyer persona, when when you do some customer mapping, that's also where you find the stories.
Yeah.
And when brands can facilitate stories, the brands, when a marketing leader and a brand manager and the agencies or whatever understand that the main character of a brand story is not the brand but the customer, and the customer pains and desires and dreams and the needs, that's what the storytelling starts to shift, and people gets more engaged with the content, gets more engaged with the story they're telling, where it's a digital format, I don't know, and something on the streets or whatever it is. I think when you change who the hero of the story is, and in the classic hero's journey, when you change who the hero is, we traditional marketing used to be about the brand, right? Like
Yeah.
we are the best, we are, right? Like
Yeah.
look at them, themselves. But that's when the big shift can produce more results and engagement with the audience. And also because every brand is competing against people just pulling up their phones and start doom scrolling, right, on
Yeah.
TikTok or Instagram, or watching a video on YouTube. So we need to create a compelling content as a brand to engage with the audiences, because attention, like, I don't know who said it, but attention is the new oil, the new gold. So if you get
No,
the
it's right.
attention.
It's right, and it really is brands who can really take advantage of the opportunity to educate, to inform, to entertain. Right. To your point, it shouldn't be about them, or it shouldn't be about us. It should be
Yeah,
about our audience. It should be about creating those moments where our audience can engage with us around a topic that's meaningful to them.
yeah. I wanna jump to this last part that I want to do with you, and I want to create like this parallel. What are those things in marketing that you think are never going to change, and we as marketers can go and research, go and study, go and get a deep dive on these things? And what are those things that you think that those things are going to die, these things, you don't need to pay attention to this is just going to be, mutated in the near future, or things that are going to heavily change in the near future, or in the, I don't know, let's be speculative and
Yeah.
irresponsible speculation, but also the things that you think are core things, core values in marketing that are probably never going to change. What are those two worlds?
That's a really good question. I'm going to start by saying that I didn't go to school for marketing, right? I think that an education in marketing can come through many different pathways, including
Yeah.
learning on the job, which is a lot of what I did. So the textbook approach to marketing has never really sat very well with me, right? I almost
Yeah.
would turn around your question a little bit and indulge, if you can indulge me for a second, and say
Sure.
what are the things that will make a good marketer for the future? And I also think that these are things that are specific to and important to anyone who wants to create an opportunity for leadership in their life. The first is intellectual curiosity, right? Constantly wanting to learn more, experience more, find new pathways into topics that are important to you. Because with that curiosity and that expansiveness of thinking often comes the greatest ideas. Um, the second is around empathy, right? Having care and concern for the people around you. I mean, initially that starts with the people who are closest to you, your family, your
Yeah.
friends, right? But it also applies to how you operate in the workplace, and how your brand and your company, your business lives within people's lives. If all you want to be is a transactional component of your customer's life, fine, you can do that. That's like the simplest thing in the world. But if you do want to actually have a greater impact and create a longer term relationship that is going to bring both value to the customer, but also incredible business value to your company, then that takes empathy, it takes understanding, it takes kindness and respect. And I think that those things are a little too they're not always present. And I
Yeah.
would say that the most successful businesses are those who allow those things to be present. Um, I do think that there's a world out there that we are just starting to learn about as it relates to artificial intelligence and how that can positively or potentially negatively impact marketing. Um, the sort of mantra that I've used with my team and that I've encouraged our company to get behind is stop trying to build everything into a framework and create a position or a policy around something like AI, and just get into the weeds and start playing. That idea of play is
Yeah.
super important. It's important in childhood development, and it's just as important as professionals later in our careers, right? The more opportunity we can have to play around with things, to experiment, to get wacky and try new things, I think the better off we are going to be in our work lives, the better off our companies are going to be in how we move forward into a new era, and ultimately how our customers and how the world is going to be, right? If we can sort of link arms and play around and explore and experiment, who knows what the outcomes are going to be, but it's
Yeah.
sure an exciting time to be looking at them.
Yeah, it's sure an exciting time, and we were recently at last year we were at Inbound, the HubSpot event,
Mm-hmm.
the yearly HubSpot event. We were, HubSpot is sponsor of this show,
Mm.
uh, mm, and we were there, and we interviewed Rob. What was his last name? The chief operating officer at HubSpot.
Mm-hmm.
This C-suite guy, super hard. Scheduling with him was like 6 months with anticipated 6 months anticipation to his calendar. And he said something about AI when we asked him about AI, and he said, "This is not the time. We're not at the time to start making hard business decisions on AI. This is the time to be playful with it. This is the time to explore. This is the time to have fun, because everything you're having fun right now with AI is going to change in the next 6 months.
That's
So
right.
you cannot get attached with how you're using it, how it's improving your funnels, how it's improving your content creation methodology. Like you said, like, this is not the time to creating rigid frameworks, inflexible frameworks for how AI can fit, or can we push it into our way of work, our way of doing things. This is the time to be playful, to explore, to be scientific, to test, to. And he said, like, also, this is the time to use ChatGPT only as a spell checking tool.
Right. That's
Just
right.
like that. Just use it however you want, but start using it, start getting comfortable with it. And then you can make business decision when AI starts to create hard pillars on society and business.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you need to, like, stop being playful, and yeah, maybe you can start squeeze some value out of it, like real long lasting business value.
That's right. I
So
completely
yeah,
agree.
it reminded me what you said, reminded me of what he said. Like, this is the time to be playful, and I love that idea because everyone is so amped up, right? Like, everyone is so, oh, if you don't integrate AI, if people doesn't say, if they curriculum and if their LinkedIn doesn't say like they have some certification on using AI, I'm not gonna hire them. It's like, wait a minute, just don't rush it. We need to go at a good pace, but we need to start experimenting on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's key. Being playful and experiment. I think. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no, no. I was
Mm.
going to say I
Mm.
agree.
Yeah, and for this last part, what is that advice that you can give to all marketers, whether they are in an early stage in their leadership career, or maybe are seasoned veterans in the marketing world? What advice you think they can take value out of?
Yeah, a couple of those statements I made about what makes a good marketer, empathy, intellectual curiosity, are also sort of part of a trio of truths that I hold dear when it comes to what I describe as mindful leadership. Um,
Okay.
and, leading with kindness is super important, but also being self reflective and understanding what your limitations are and also admitting when you're wrong, expressing that vulnerability and showing that vulnerability to the people who you lead, as well as to your colleagues and your peers, is scary. It's really scary to do that, right? But I think that the leaders who are able to do that at their core and are able to sort of represent themselves as truthful, honest reflections of who they are the ones who are most successful.
Yeah.
I've always said that if you demonstrate care and concern for others in the workplace, allowing them that space to be vulnerable and assuring them that a true balance between work and life is possible, I think it creates better outcomes on both sides, in work and in
Yeah.
life.
It
And
does.
my teams have always known that's how I operate. They know if there's something going on outside of work that would be brought to work if they were trying to do work in those moments. I'll tell them to take the time to figure that thing out, right?
Mm.
Because one, that's going to create a stronger connection between you and that person. But two, it's going to give them the ability to focus on what's truly important in that moment. I mean, work is work. Work is always going to be here. And if we work for
Yeah.
organizations that are strong and successful, one person's absence for a day or two isn't going to have a negative impact on our business. But it is going to have a very positive impact on how they come back to that business when they're ready to do so.
Amazing. That's great finishing touch. Cherry on the top on this interview. Andrew,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you again for accepting this interview and accepting this short but sweet. I know you have to continue with your day, but thank you very much. All the back and forth of email, it was worth it.
It
This
was
was a great
absolutely. It was
conversation. Very,
tremendous
you
pleasure.
know,
Tremendous pleasure on my part. Thank you so much.